Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon, or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode.
My message has changed over the years from just telling stories about paranormal activity and demon hauntings and so on to what this book is really about. And that's the base fact that evil and good exist. Evil is just not, personality disorders of people or evil intentions of evil people. Evil, apart from the human race, demons, the devil, is real.
Tonight's guest had an eye on buying a beautiful home since he was a little boy. When he came back after a stint in the military, Bob Cranmer finally had the opportunity and leaped at it. Little did he know, he was jumping right into a house that was not only a haunting, but had a demonic presence. Get ready for
The Demon of Brownsville Road.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
Bob Cranmer was born in Pittsburgh, graduating from Brentwood High School in 1974 and Duquesne University in 1978. He then entered the U.S. Army as a second lieutenant and served with the 101st Airborne Division and in Washington, D.C. In 1986, Bob went to work for AT&T and returned to Pittsburgh. Entering politics, he was elected Allegheny County Commissioner in 1995, serving as chairman. Bob was instrumental in a major development plan for Pittsburgh involving the construction of 2 sports stadiums and a new convention center. Bob currently runs a firm providing government relations. October 1988. Bob Cranmer buys a house in the Pittsburgh suburb he grew up in. He has no idea that his dream home is about to become his worst nightmare. The Cranmers seemed fated to own the house at 3406 Brownsville Road. As a young boy, Bob had been drawn to the property, and just when the family decided to move back to Brentwood, it went up for sale. Without a second thought, they purchased the house that Bob had always dreamed of owning. But soon, the family began experiencing strange phenomena. Objects moving on their own, ghostly footsteps, unsettling moaning sounds that gradually increased in violence, escalating to physical assaults and, most disturbingly, bleeding walls. Bob, Lesa, and their 4 children were under attack from a malicious demon that was conjuring up terrifying manifestations to destroy their tight-knit household. They had 2 choices: leave or draw on their unwavering faith to exorcise the malicious fiend who haunted their home. Now, Bob Cranmer recounts the harrowing true story of the evil presence that tormented his family and the epic spiritual war he fought to save everything he held dear in his book, The Demon of Brownsville Road, a Pittsburgh family's battle with evil in their home. So we have tonight a gentleman and a story I've been wanting to have on this show for several years. His name is Bob Cranmer, and his book, The Demon of Brownsville Road, a Pittsburgh family's battle with evil in their home, is a story that took, like a fine wine, many years to unfold. And it was really a testament of faith and good against evil. So welcome to the show, a real survivor, Bob Cranmer.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been, next year will be 10 years since I published the book, and many interviews and documentaries and so on since then. And also a whole lot of things have happened to me in my life, not all good, that I believe are all tied together. But that's part of the territory that comes with this subject.
A lot of times people want to know or even look up the book while we have the podcast. Can you tell them what website, where to find it, and re-mention the name again so they can look this up? They may want to kind of follow along while we do this.
Sure. The easiest way to get it is on Amazon. It has, how many reviews? 600-700 reviews. It's a staple there. So, yeah, Demon of Brownsville Road on Amazon.
That's great. Yeah, it's a great book, and we'll get into the story. But really, first, I want to introduce our listeners to the players, which is you. You have a very interesting background, and your family. I want them to know about the family that walked into this and kind of what they had to deal with. So do you mind just introducing us to yourself and your family, who you were at that point in 1988, October, when you were getting ready to buy this house that seemed predestined for you to have?
Yeah, in 1988, I had been a career military officer, regular Army officer, up until just about late 86 into 87. Had 4 children. Well, when I left the Army, I had 3. When we moved back here, I had 4, 3 boys and a girl, 4-year-old, 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn, Jessica, Bobby, David, and Charlie. So I left the military. Some things happened in my family that made my wife and I decide that the military career and moving around the world wasn't what we were looking forward to. My older brother, who was also in the military, was killed, and my family was in turmoil. So we left the military to come back home. Unfortunately, at that time, Pittsburgh was still recovering from the closing of the steel industry here, and there weren't jobs readily available. So I came here by way of New Jersey, where I got a job with AT&T, was there for 18 months, and then transferred to Pittsburgh, realizing our dream. What we decided we wanted out of life as a young family was to enable our children to get on their bicycles and ride and see their grandparents, on their own. Whereas in the military, you see your family basically maybe once or twice a year. So we achieved that. It was very interesting because this house that had been my dream house from the time in my earliest memories as a child, I always was intrigued and attracted to this house. When we moved back, the house came on the market. It was timed perfectly. And even though it was not exactly a house for a young family at the time, I decided to buy it. My wife wasn't too excited about it.
Now, this is a huge house, right? This is like 3 stories. I don't know how many windows, but a ton. It had like servants' quarters would be up on the 3rd floor, a servant's different stairway.
Yeah, the whole Downton Abbey thing. It has the servant's bell and the servier off the kitchen where food was prepared and delivered to the dining room by a butler. It had servant steps, a servant's bathroom, servant's quarters, The servants' quarters at the time were actually a separate carriage house in the back of the house, the third floor, which is now a separate small apartment, was in fact a recreation room when the house was built and some bedrooms. So yeah, it's a big place. It's a big place. I certainly know bigger houses in Pittsburgh, but this was very unique. Very unique architecture. Doesn't follow the standard architecture of Pittsburgh, red and brick 3-story houses that are big boxes. This looks more like something that you would see in New England.
Yeah.
Cedar shakes and big 40-foot long front porch with big Victorian, Roman Greek white pillars on the porch, 6 of them, large barrel pillars. So it looks, because of the cedar shake, something from New England, but the pillars kind of also have that Southern Victorian feel as well. So it's a very impressive house, and everybody in the South Hills of Pittsburgh has noticed it. It's very unique.
So to level set our audience, you're 32. Basically, you're coming back home to the borough of Brentwood in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where you grew up. You knew this house as a kid at like 3406 Brownsville Road. You kind of passed it every day. It always kind of entranced you a little bit. It's actually your mom that played a role, right, in terms of letting you know before it went on the market that this was available?
Yes, she was a retired real estate broker. We were coming back. It was kind of an exciting time. We just had our 4th child, and we got this great transfer with AT&T. I got a big raise in pay. Actually, we had built a brand new house where we were, and AT&T bought it from us, and we made like $30,000 on it. So we were riding high. And again, for my age and my wife at the time, I guess, let's see, I was 32 and she was 27, and we had 4 kids, and we were really riding high, and came back with the idea of we weren't going to live in this borough where I grew up. It had become, I think, too middle class for us, and we wanted to move to a different school district, kind of more of an upscale neighborhood. But my mother said to me, "Oh, by the way, your house is going up for sale." All she had to say was my house, and I immediately knew what house she was referring to. So that's the story, and we bought it.
So I have a question. Realtors usually know of an inside scoop if there's rumors about a house or anything. Did your mom have any inkling about the history of this house, or was she totally surprised when stuff started happening?
No, she had no idea of any issues with this house particularly. Now, other people in the community who had been here for a long time knew about issues that I later found out after I moved in. In fact, a month or 2 after we were here, and I already knew that there were things were going on in the house, within weeks after we moved in. But I was at work with a gentleman whose family was from Brentwood. And I told him, he goes, "My father grew up right over the hill." And I told him what house I purchased. And he says, "Oh, you bought that haunted house."
Oh, God.
And I said, "What?" He said, "Oh, yeah, that house has real issues." Now, again, I played dumb. I already knew. I said, "Well, what do you know?" And he said, "Well, my father back during the Depression went in that house. It was empty." And he was right. I later found out that the original owners had lost it for taxes. It was going to go up for sheriff's sale, and the house was empty during the Depression. And this guy's father, as a young boy, and his friend had gotten into the house and, quote, were chased out of it by something. That's all he said. They were chased out of it. And it had a reputation as having issues. And later on, I did just tremendous research on every aspect of the story and the house, and was able to verify probably 90% of all the stories and information that I gleaned, because we did our best to try to determine what had happened in the house, why the house was possessed, not why it was haunted, why it was possessed.
I mean, there are many things in the research, two in particular in your front yard, and also about a doctor who lived there during the 1920s and 30s. We'll get to that. Things seem to go very smoothly for you. Your first offer was accepted, and then your first time in the house, your oldest son, who would be affected, one of your two sons, I think, that was very much affected by the house, had an unsettling experience from the start. Is that correct?
We came to the house a couple times during the purchase process, I think twice. My oldest son, who was 3 years old at the time, and he really can't remember this. He's like, my number one son now. I see him almost every day. But he was separated from us during the showing of the house. The owners were taking my wife and I through, and we had our daughter, who was the oldest, and she was 4, and our son, the oldest boy, who was 3. We were in the basement looking at this gigantic furnace, akin to like a nuclear reactor. It was so big. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Where's Bobby?" And she said, "I don't know. Where's he at?" And we looked around and our daughter said, "He's upstairs." So my wife and the lady of the house is so big, it's not like you can just call upstairs. I mean, you have to go. So they went up the steps, the basement steps, to the first floor to find him. And they went into the front of the house in the big foyer, where there's a large staircase that goes up to a balcony on the second floor. And there's a landing halfway up the steps where the steps reverse back again to go up. He was standing on that landing halfway up the steps, quivering. And the woman kind of rushed ahead and embraced him and said, "Oh, come here, honey. Did you see something? What's wrong? Did you see something?" And my wife keyed in on that like right away and thought to herself, "Well, what do you mean, did he see something? Like what kind of question is that?" And he settled down and he didn't say a whole lot. He was very quiet at the time. But my wife kind of filed that away in her head, like, this is creepy. This is creepy. What's she talking about? Did you see something?
He was scared to sleep in his own bed, right, for a while, and he would sleep in the closet. I mean,
yeah. Well, he had one of the large bedrooms, and you can imagine these rooms are so big with 10-foot ceilings and big doors and big. I mean, the rooms are big. As Victorian houses are, you had 4 large bedrooms on the second floor. A fifth, what we used as a bedroom, really as a nursery, was originally designed to be a maid's room where they had a walk-in closet. They'd keep all the linen in this closet, and then there was a room for ironing and sewing and so on. It's big enough to be a bedroom with a single bed, but they're big rooms. There were 4 bedrooms. The back bedrooms all were connected by rooms. Back in the day, in the Victorian times, husbands and wives slept in separate bedrooms, and they would have a door between them. So that's what this house had. But he was in a front bedroom that was by itself, that later we would find out hadn't been used in a bedroom as a bedroom for years. It had issues. But it turned out to be his bedroom, and he would not sleep in the bed for at least a year.
Wow.
He slept in the closet with the light on, and we put a little crib mattress on the floor, and that's where he slept. He would not sleep in the bed.
Now, you have a dog now. Did you have pets then? And if you did, how did they react to the house?
Well, after a year or so in the house, we got a dog, the typical family dog, a 5th child. Later on, years later, when the activity really kicked up a lot, he could see these entities, and many times I would find him standing at the entrance to a empty bedroom, or what was seemingly empty, barking and growling, looking into the bedroom. And you would go and look, and there's nothing there, but he obviously saw something. In my book, there actually is a picture. I used to call that his terminal stare. He would go into almost like a pointing position and begin to bark. once in the middle of what I call the war during the exorcism of the house, I was coming down the steps with a camera. I had been taking pictures of a phenomenon that happened where there was the appearance of blood on seeping down the walls. And I had a camera in my hand, and he was at the bottom of the steps in his terminal stare position. So I simply held up the camera and took a picture of him. And when we had the photos developed a couple days later, here I was standing right in front of, or almost in the midst of, this entity that you can't see it with at least humans can't see these entities with the naked eye, but animals for some reason can. It has something to do with how our brains can process these images, and animals can and humans can't. But cameras can see them. You can clearly see this stuff, not only, demonic entities, but even ghosts. I mean, you can go to Gettysburg in the summertime, go out on the battlefield where it's pitch black, take your phone and click 10 or 15 pictures in the pitch black. And I guarantee you, when you look at the pictures, at least 2 or 3 of them, you'll be able to see entities on those pictures.
Yeah, Gettysburg is. I've been there a couple times. There's a great Paracon in August, I think. There's Gettysburg's pretty much well known for that. I imagine you don't go to too many Paracons. You probably have your fill of that.
When you live with something like this for several years and you interact with it on a personal basis, as I did, day in and day out. I mean, I'm dealing with a supernatural being. It's like living with the invisible man. Yeah, you learn a lot. I know a lot. I can give advice. I can tell you what's happening, but you don't find me in any Pittsburgh Paranormal Society or anything like that. I mean, that's a dangerous hobby to have. You never know what you're dealing with. Yeah, most of the time you're dealing with a ghost, but in some cases you're not, and that stuff can hurt you. It can hurt you.
Yeah. Now, your sons, your oldest one in particular, is he an empath, or does he have any psychic ability? Because a lot of times those spirits tend to go to those sensitive sorts. Do you know? Does he, now that he's older, has he ever unveiled that he has certain capabilities or not?
No. He was really, really impacted by it. I mean, there was at one point in time, we actually thought he was possessed at one point.
Oh, God.
He wasn't, but it really impacted him heavily and led to a lot of problems in his teenage years, serious problems. At one point, I didn't think he'd make it out of his teenage years, but he rebounded.
Good for him.
He has beautiful children. He's very successful, and he's like my rock now. He's a Freemason and so on, and he's a really solid guy now. Really proud of him.
Oh, that's great. That's a good ending. I mean, we're going to go into a fairly quick timeline of the first decade or so, and then things really got a little wonky in 2004. But were you a very religious man when you stepped into the house at age 32, or did your faith just bloom once you were in there dealing with this dark entity?
I was raised Catholic in Pittsburgh, and in my teenage years, I think when I was 16 or 17, I had a born-again experience and eventually became a fervent evangelical Christian. Went to Baptist churches and so on, and even at one point was ordained, or ministers were ordained. I was licensed as a preacher. I could hold services and so on. Oh. So yeah, I was really into the evangelical culture of Christianity. What blossomed when this whole event began to unfold was my discovery as to how kind of shallow my faith was and my understanding was. And I think that does typify that whole type of Christianity. It's kind of simple. And Christianity is much deeper and much more spiritual and much harder to understand than, the guys with all the answers on radio and TV will make it out to be. I mean, when I first went to the pastor of my church and told him what I thought was happening in the house, that there were really evil spirits in the house that were plaguing the family, his response kind of was, well, what do you want me to do? And it was my going to the Catholic Church that changed everything.
Mm. Now, the first decade or so was more kind of annoyances and stuff, but there were some kind of interesting things, like when you went out to the garden and you stuck a shovel in the ground and hit something. Can you talk about the first couple of years and how you guys thought, just a ghost, it's harmless, but things started kind of building and affecting your family slowly but surely, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was within a month or so after moving in. My wife and I came to the conclusion we bought a house with a ghost. Now, neither one of us had any experience with any paranormal activity or ghosts or anything. I've told this story so many times, but again, it's worth telling again. It was the first verification that we came to, or we knew there was something in the house that we couldn't explain. And that's with the closet under the stairway. It's a large walk-in closet, and it has a light in it, a glass Victorian shade with a pull chain. And, you open up the door and you have to turn on the light because you can't see into it. And the light is right there on the right-hand side as you open the door. So you simply just feel for it and pull the chain, turn on the light. And I kept my coat in there, my overcoat and so on. And my wife kept this vacuum cleaner. And it's a big closet. So the first month, we moved in early December. I'd say by Christmas or so, I noticed that every time I would open that closet door to get my coat, the chain that hangs from the light would be wrapped around the top of the shade, meaning it was not hanging there. Or it was meticulously wrapped around the little screws that hold the shade in, the crystal shade. And I would have to stop and feel around and untangle the chain before I could turn it on. So that happened, 3 or 4 times. And I said to my wife, I said, honey, please, when you pull that chain, don't pull it quickly and let it fly because it's tangling itself around the light. It's kind of a pain in the neck to have to unwrap that. And she said, well, I don't pull the chain and let it fly. And I haven't even been in the closet today, so I really don't know what you're talking about. So we did an experiment, and one morning, I can remember it specifically, as I was getting ready to go to work. And again, this light is even with my eyes, and I'm 6 feet tall, or at least I was 6 feet tall then. So it's well up off the floor. Kids couldn't even get in that closet, let alone get near that light. So we looked at it. I turned the light on. I said, I closed the door. Now don't go in this closet rest of the day, and let's see what happens tonight. And when I came home that night, it was kind of a drum roll, and we opened up the closet door, and sure enough, the chain was meticulously wrapped around the light. So with that one event, okay, we got something going on here. And we realized, okay, what do we do? And then, the comment of the woman, what did you see, all of a sudden made sense. And we realized, okay, we bought a problem here. What are we going to do? So that was the beginning of the realization that we were dealing with real life paranormal.
So who was the first one to witness like a misty figure or like a sensation? Was it your wife or your children or you? Who was the first one beyond that kind of incident? There are other things that happened too. There
was so much that happened prior to that. Now, we always thought, okay, there's a ghost here. Hopefully it's not mean or anything. Maybe we can just, there's lots of haunted houses you hear about. Yeah. And maybe we can just peacefully coexist. And as events and things happened, you'd come down in the morning and the lights would be on the first floor. I had a radio down in the basement in my workshop that was always on, and furniture would be moved around. And after you're kind of freaked out by that stuff once or twice, you just kind of put the stuff back where it's supposed to be, and you turn out the lights or turn off the radio and move on. But I did really feel that my faith could combat this if it was in fact evil. And I used to pray out loud, and I would have my children, we would sing gospel songs at night when I was putting them to bed. I thought, okay, we're a Christian family, we have faith, we're going to be okay. But to answer your question, I'd have to say my son was about 8 years old when he was the one who first saw a physical, at least to my knowledge, he was the one that saw a physical entity or a misty, smoky figure, a black figure passing in front of his doorway one day when he was home from school sick. And my wife went out to the pharmacy to get medicine, and he was in the house by himself. And he saw this black figure eventually come into his room. So,
wasn't it 3? It was started off with 1, and then there were a couple others, or am I not remembering that correctly?
What?
Your son, he was homesick. I thought he had like 3 uninvited guests. I thought I heard that. Maybe I got that wrong from somewhere.
Well, I mean, what happened, as I recall, as the story goes, he saw this black entity come into his room and was at the foot of his bed.
Yeah.
And he covered his head with the blankets and was scared under the blankets. And all of a sudden, the blankets all were pulled off of him down to the end of the bed and folded. And all of a sudden, the black entity disappeared, and he saw this, not black, but like a glowing, sparkling, flashing light kind of entity floating above his bed. I think that might have been some type of angel or protection that flushed this thing away from him at the time.
Wow.
But that's what he describes.
And, fast forwarding a little bit to, I think around 2004, activity started becoming unhinged, and, a demonic infestation was suspected, or I don't know if your mom suggested you get a priest in, or I think 2 priests came in, and that's when things started reaching a pinnacle. Is that right?
Yes and no. We did have early on, when we first moved in and these things started to become fairly regular, my mother belonged to the local Catholic Church here. And, I've seen the movie The Exorcist, and I figured, well, the Catholic Church kind of has a handle on this stuff. So I asked my mother to talk to one of the priests at her church to see if he could come and not do an exorcism, but do a ritual blessing of the house where prayers are said, and they walk through the house with holy water, and they bless all the rooms in the house. And it's a festive, kind of joyous thing. But I thought, okay, maybe that'll take care of it. So that was the first time a priest came to the house. Now, later on, when the proverbial stuff hit the fan, so to speak, around the year 2000, really in the late 90s, it's just that I really didn't realize how living with this evil entity was affecting my family and affecting me as well. But it was in the early 2000s, 2003, when it became very, very first person. I mean, you're talking about stuff flying through the air and smashing on the walls, and it was not hiding its or masking its presence in the house anymore.
Did the blood start appearing then?
No, that is something that took place. This battle began in late 2003 in December, and it lasted to the beginning through 2004 through 2005, and the final expulsion did not take place until about the beginning, maybe February, March of 2006. So you're talking over 2 years.
That's exhausting.
Yeah,
Jesus.
and about,
My God.
about halfway through in January of 2005.
Listen closely because you're going to hear some type of weird sound here. I'll amplify it and see if you can make it out. And this is on Bob's channel, by the way. And now I'm going to slow it down.
We were at our wits' end. I mean, it was just so bad. The kids were so bad. They were out of school, 2 of them. My daughter had moved out of the house. My wife was unhinged. I was unhinged. And we had been working with the church for a year, and things were getting worse. And at that point in time, I mean, literally, my wife and I were talking about getting a divorce at that point. It was so bad. And I believe that the demon kind of declared victory at that point in time and began this process of covering the walls in the house with this blood-like substance that would be thrown onto the walls, not all at one time. It started on the 3rd floor, made its way down to the 2nd floor and to the 1st floor and eventually to the basement.
And here we go again.
And if you can imagine a priest walking through the house, sprinkling holy water on the walls and in the rooms, if you replace the holy water with a container of blood.
Do you think the entity was mocking Christ, the body of Christ?
Oh, there's no question. Everything they do is to mock church, mock things that are holy, even down to the scratches. When they scratch you, it's generally 3 scratch marks.
The Trinity, right?
And, they will mock and make fun of holy things. And this was a powerful, powerful demon. This was no,
Did you ever get a name? Did you ever get a name for the demon? Or
We did.
Okay.
At least the Paranormal Research Society, that went on to great fame with their own television show years later after this was their first big case. And I really think with this case began the whole paranormal.
That wasn't Ghost Adventures, was it? Because I know I've had guests on my show.
It was Paranormal State.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, right, yeah.
Brian Buell and
Yep,
Paranormal State,
yeah.
from Penn State University. They were the first big program. Ghost hunters wanted to come here. It was after we had taken care of it. I don't want anyone coming in here trying to roust anything.
Was
up,
Michelle
so
Belanger with him at that time coming into? She's kind of a psychic. She's been on this show before.
Pardon me?
Michelle Belanger, or she was part of his team. I don't know if she went to your house, but she's kind of a psychic. She's been on this show before. I was just curious.
No, we dealt with several psychics. There was one who was associated with the Paranormal State group that initially going to come. She's from Gettysburg. I think her name was Julie, and she's pretty famous. And she was going to come with them. There was about 10 of them that came to begin with. And at the last minute, she said, "No, I'm not going to go near that house." And I suggest you don't go near it either. So that was but she did, to her credit, gave them instructions as to what they needed to do when they came. And I can say that literally broke open the whole warfare that we were going through. It was a defining moment, and I have to attribute it to her insight as to what we needed to do. And we did. And 2 psychics played critical, and I've used the word psychic. The Catholic Church, at least Connie Valente, who worked with us, she was called a holy intuitive, not to be confused with some type of a witch type character. These people have gifts. They can see things. They understand things. It's not evil. They just can plug into the supernatural, and they can see things.
Yeah, we don't want to steal the thunder from the book. If they read the book, they'll see pictures, they'll get the name of the demon, they'll know kind of what these psychics or what happened that tilted it back in your favor. Because it seemed the dark entity would just get more angry and angry the more you tried to do stuff, and wanted to show you again and again that it was. Yeah.
I would say this demon, if in fact, as I believe, the name is accurate, it's pretty famous. I mean, it's named in the Bible, and is named in that movie that just came out, which is spellbinding. That movie called
The Pope's Exorcist, or
no, starts with an N. Nefarious.
Nefarious, right? Okay, yeah.
It's spellbinding. But watching that movie, I just saw it last week. I was able to identify and relate to so many things that took place in that movie. It's so accurate. I'm not going to say it's scary. To me, it just reconfirmed what I experienced.
Yeah, that's on my list. That's mostly isn't like a prisoner and a priest if he's on death row or something, and they're kind of a battle of will and wits back and forth.
Well, I mean, what it is, it's kind of a Ted Bundy type situation where this prisoner is going to be executed, and before the prisoner can be executed, a psychiatrist has to examine them and say they're not crazy, because if they're mentally unstable, they can't legally be executed. So in the process of examining this prisoner, this psychiatrist, who's an atheist, comes face to face with a demon.
Mm.
That's the theme, and it's chilling.
Now, your story, there's so many chilling things we could bring up, but I think what I want to do, I do want them to read the book, but you said you did some research, and there's two things that kind of came up. One was about a tree, and when you were planting in the garden, your shovel hit something, I think in the 1990s. There's a story there. And there's also a story when you did your research about a doctor, during the 1920s and 30s who had kind of an unscrupulous.
Oh, there's really two stories, three altogether. I can address them. The first that you're mentioning happened really in 1989, the spring after we moved in, and I was in the front corner of the property planting flowers in a certain area at the end of the driveway, and my hand shovel, I was planting daffodils or whatever, and the shovel hit a metal box. And I dug the box up, which was only inches under the ground. It wasn't anything ancient. It looked still fairly new. I can imagine, I think it was like a Sucrets box or something, old Sucrets lozenges, but it was metal. And I opened it up and I found religious paraphernalia in it, religious medals. I think there was a Catholic scapular in it. And that kind of freaked me out because I already had experienced things happening in the house. I knew the house was haunted, and I knew the previous owners knew what was going on from that comment. And also, I did not mention that after that happened, my wife had me confront the man who was selling us the house, and I asked him if there was anything, quote, wrong with the house. Now, you would think that he would say, well, define wrong.
Yeah.
Something structural, windows, furnace. No, he knew right away what I meant. He said, no, there's nothing wrong. In fact, we've had mass in the living room twice.
Geez.
Now, who has mass in their living room? So I called him up, and I told him about the box. And there was silence on the other end of the phone. He didn't have to be as secretive at that point because I already bought the house. And he said, just please put the box back where you found it. Bury it and put it back. That's all I'll say. So they obviously had mass in the house. They had tried working with the church and working with priests to cleanse the house. One of the techniques, because I later did it, is you bury religious objects at the four corners of the property, and the house property is blessed as well as the house. So they obviously had done that too, and I had accidentally uncovered one of the things they had buried, as I later would do as well. Mm. That was the first instance you talked about. Now, the second was the discovery through the intuitive of a doctor who did not live in the house. He lived near the house. It was during the 1920s and 30s. He was a pediatrician, very wealthy, because I think I'm relatively sure he worked with the mob, and he would practice performing illegal abortions. Obviously, abortions were illegal at that time, but he was a doctor, and he had what he called his hospital. It was in a neighborhood called Arlington, overlooking the South Side, where all the mills and where all the immigrants lived, and where all the vice was, and the numbers, rackets, and the brothels, and so on. What we understand was that for, I guess, higher level clientele that didn't want to be seen going into his office or so on, wanted a more discreet place to go where they could have this procedure performed and it would be very discreet. And this house is very large, and the driveway wraps around the back of the house, and there was a door in the back, several doors, and you could enter and exit the house through the back of the house and not be seen. So he would perform his practice in the Blue Room, which was would end up being my son's bedroom. So he would perform his practice in one of the bedrooms. We're not really sure how long he did that, but I have a feeling it was for years. So that was a big problem with the house. But I think the biggest problem I discovered was that back in the 1700s, post-Revolutionary War, there was an Indian raid, American Indians, who had gone to war with the new United States over the settlement of Ohio and Indiana, and they went to war with George Washington was president. They sent raiding parties out to discourage settlers. They came here. Apparently, this house obviously wasn't here in 1792, but there was a log cabin or some type of structure, and a mother and her 3 children were killed on the property and were buried at the foot of a large oak tree. It wasn't a large oak tree then, but it's in the front yard. So there's a grave with 4 people, 3 children and their mother in the front yard. And we believe that the evil that was associated with that massacre, with those killings, the spirits that they were prayed to give the warriors courage and victory, attached themselves or attached itself to the land where the murder took place, and eventually, when this house was built, inhabited the house, and thus the origin of the problems and the possession of the house and the property.
So you believe, you'd mentioned, this is really a story of good versus evil and how faith helped you through it, correct?
You know, over the years, when I give talks, and I still will go out and talk to groups that want me to come and talk about my book. And, you know, I've even gone and talked to UFO conventions and so on about what we experienced.
Yeah.
My message has changed over the years from just telling stories about paranormal activity and demon hauntings and so on to what this book is really about. And that's the base fact that evil and good exist. Evil is just not, personality disorders of people or evil intentions of evil people. Evil, apart from the human race, demons, the devil, is real. That God, Jesus Christ, and all that took place concerning the cross and redemption and this great supernatural battle that's been taking place for however long, since creation.
You can make out of that what you think it says. It sounded like a 4-letter word to me. That's another isolated sound that was on Bob Cranmer's soundtrack. So I don't know. Maybe it's just weird noises in the background, but just calling it out.
when the angels, third of the angels were forced out of heaven down to the earth. That's all real. Whatever people want to believe about science and, the Big Bang Theory and all that. No, I'm telling you, my message is, folks, God and the devil and evil and the Bible and Jesus Christ, it's all true. Angels, it's all true. And you got to come to grips with it. The 10 Commandments and our own sin and our need for redemption and need for a Savior, it's all true. So whether people like it or not, and you read the reviews of my book online, most people, 4 out of 5 people think it's a great book. But the people who don't like it really don't like it because it challenges what they don't believe. And they're forced to change, or at least considering changing that, and they're not happy with it. And they really hate me as the messenger. So my message about this book and why I felt so compelled to write it wasn't to just write some scary story about possession or haunting. It's to say, to message, especially in these days where people pay little attention to God or the Bible or go to church or anything like that, especially young people. There is a creator. There is evil in the world, and we have a decision to make, who we're going to follow. And that's the message of my book.
And right after Bob says that, this sound happens. And I'll tell you what I hear. It sounds like it says, hate God. What do you think? So it sounds like people who like the film Nefarious will like your book. So if they see that film, they should definitely scoop your book up. Do you still live in the house? It's an inn now, right? Do you still live on premises?
I'm sitting on the 3rd floor right now.
Oh, my God. You're in the blue room, are you?
I live in the house by myself. My life has been somewhat traumatic since I wrote the book. And I attribute that to, this book is kind of like outing the mob.
Yeah.
Evil does not like when the devil wants people not to believe that evil is a medieval superstition, that evil is not real. And I always start all my talks out describing that the absolute certainty of evil in the world beyond human beings and how evil can impact whole nations is what happened in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. How the most sophisticated, advanced, cultured, scientific, impressive, educated country in history, in Germany, within a few years, went from the cradle of Einstein and Beethoven and all of culture and Freud to rounding up people and putting them in train cars and burning them in furnaces. That's evil.
How are you now compared to the military intelligence officer that left the Army and came there at age 32? How much are you different? It sounds like you're a much stronger person, and it's almost like you're vigilant at that house. I know you're not watching over it to keep evil away, but you mentioned it could be a ghost there still, potentially, but it's really like a nice, quaint bed and breakfast inn right now, correct?
I have never had any guests, and there have been hundreds of them come, say anything, but this is one of the most peaceful places we've ever been. Yeah. And it should be. It's like a church.
Yeah.
We had mass so many times on the first floor, the second floor, in the attic, in the basement. Such a battle was fought here. Battlefields, you go to Gettysburg, it's kind of a peaceful place when you go out there,
Yeah, it's a memorial, yeah.
Yeah, it's a memorial, and that's what this is, like a memorial to a great battle that took place. And it's like a cemetery. It's not cemetery, but it's peaceful. A great battle, a tremendous battle took place in this house. And how am I? I still have a degree of post-traumatic stress, kind of like coming out of World War I and trench warfare, because that's what I was involved in, trench warfare. Maybe it just comes with age. Certainly I know what took place. I know what had to be done But I'm not going out looking to pick fights with any people.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm hopefully done with it. My life has really taken its hits over the years since the book was published. I expected that. Comes with the territory. And I can only go back to the verse in the Bible that says, unto those who much is given, as in knowledge, much is expected. And I believe it was my duty and my destiny to write this book that will be around for a long time. And I think it has not been fully realized yet because it's a complete book. It's an entire story. It's the story of how it happened. It's a story about what happened. And it's a story about how victory in the end was achieved. And that is a complete story, unlike many, many others. It's a scary story, but it's a story with a good ending.
Well, I'll tell you, with films like Nefarious getting a lot of press, I think your book may have a renaissance of sorts. Give us one last time before we go. Where can they access the book, buy the book? I know you separate the two, the in now and the book, but is there a website you have if people wanted to, they're fans of you, they're not ghost hunters, but they do want to check out the house and meet you? Where could they go?
Yeah, the book has its own website. It's called demonofbrownsville.com. And, there's a lot of comments on it, a lot of, links. I think they still work to the various television documentaries. Russian TV actually did a documentary on it a number of years ago in Moscow. The bed and breakfast is called the Brownsville Roadhouse. It's on Brownsville Road. And it's kind of, I obviously wanted to tie, to an extent, the inn with the book, The Demon of Brownsville Road. And it's called the Brownsville Roadhouse. And it has a great website. The book has a Facebook page as well. But the main thing is, a lot of people love to watch documentaries, and there's so many documentaries online, but there was one in particular that was done last November in Britain that's about 40 minutes long. It got like 250,000 hits in a couple weeks. Probably the best I've ever seen done in detail. So there's lots on the internet you can find as well.
So what would be the key word we'd use to find that, to search for that video?
Generally, Brownsville Road.
Okay.
Brownsville Road. You'll find the Brownsville Road House, Bed and Breakfast, or the Demon of Brownsville Road. All right. Demon, Brownsville Road, Demon, Pittsburgh. Believe me, it'll come up. There's so much on the internet and so much writing. I even had for a while some guy from the Church of Satan who was attacking the book. I don't know why he would be attacking it, but it verifies probably what he believes in.
Yeah. Well, Bob, thank you so much for your time tonight. When I find a story I like, I tend to stalk it on Spotify and listen to a bunch of different shows. I've heard you many times. You present yourself so well in your story. And it's nice to hear good prevail over evil in this instance. And kudos for you for sticking it out. And thank you for sticking out this interview with me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Glory be to the cross of Jesus Christ and his resurrection, because that's the strength that fueled me and was the source of the ultimate victory. So I have to throw that in, obviously.
Sure. Amen to that, Bob. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit afraidofnothingpodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's afraidofnothingpodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout-out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.